At Kind, we're actually a fairly tight-knit team. We take turns doing all of the different responsibilities. Food scientist, product developer, R&D, they all kind of fall under our job description, I guess you'd say. For us, that means doing line extension, so coming up with new flavors for existing products or coming up with new products altogether. And then also just like the general maintenance that goes on behind the scenes of having millions of bars hit the shelf every month. Like you have to create a flavor and kind of do the nutritional and the cost and kind of, I couldn't believe that it was a job. So yeah, I work at Kind, like the classic kind of nut fruit bars that everyone thinks of. That's what we do. So I'm a food scientist there. I've been there for about 2.5 years and I do product development.
That's amazing. So, product developer, that can mean a lot of different things because at some companies that can mean you're a food scientist, you're a product developer, you're anyone who does R&D. Could you talk a little bit more about the specifics of your role?
Yeah, so at Kind, we're actually a fairly tight-knit team. We kind of take turns doing all of the different responsibilities that might kind of encompass food scientist, product developer, R&D. They all kind of fall under our job description, I guess you'd say. So for us, that means doing line extension, so coming up with new flavors for existing products or coming up with new products altogether. And then also just like the general maintenance that goes on behind the scenes of having, that millions of bars hit the shelf every month. Someone has to make sure that the peanuts and the almonds are still safe and up to par with our quality. Things like that are
Okay.
also kind of our job description.
So you mentioned line expansion, and that might
Mhm.
even be a new term for some people. Can you explain what that even means?
Yeah. So a lot of the times, we will want to fill a space on a shelf at a specific grocery store, or we're seeing a lot of success with one of our products. And maybe that product only has three flavors right now. So we want to give our consumers opportunity to buy more. So that would mean coming up with a new flavor that might fit either what our consumers are saying they want to try more of, or something we just think might taste good with this, base. So just coming up with a new flavor for something that already exists.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, taking it a step back and just talking about product development, someone might not be familiar with that even process. It's like, okay, I want to make a kind bar. Do you just go into the kitchen, you whip something up, and then you kind
I
of go
wish.
for it? Or like, could you talk like generally how that process works?
Yeah, yeah. So for us at Kind, we typically work very closely with our marketing team, our brand team. So coming up with ideas with them in the room, or they sometimes come to us with ideas, and we'll say, our classic dark chocolate nuts and sea salt bar selling super well. Let's do something similar to that, a new flavor in a year. Um, and then they'll say, people are liking the idea of seeds right now. Let's do something with seeds as opposed to just nuts. So that would then be kind of what we take back to the drawing board and come up with ideas for new flavors that work with seeds. So if that's pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, whatever it is, they give flavor ideas and testing them out in the lab. So um, that process can take anywhere from 2 days to 3 months of kind of thinking of good flavor ideas, then testing them out, refining them, working with the brand team to have them taste. And then from there, we would kind of then launch almost like a what we call a trial, where you go to a manufacturing facility and try it out at scale. So that's rather than the 1 pound batch that you're making in the lab, it's 1,000 pounds to see if it actually runs okay. And then from there, the sales team works on selling it in and the product gets launched. So there's a whole, usually at least a year timeline for typical product development. And that might be for something like a line extension where we already have an idea of kind of how the base system works. We've made our nut bars for 20 years now. We know how they work pretty well. We just want to try adding a few different things here and there. And then for a more complicated product or something that we haven't done before, the timeline will be even longer.
So, have you had any favorite products you've worked on so far?
Yeah. I think my favorite so far has been the savory kind bars.
Okay.
They're a little bit different and they're definitely not everyone's favorite. I think some people love them and some people absolutely hate them, but I think that was it was really fun to work on. Um, we had launched 3 flavors, so it's rosemary, nuts and sea salt, jalapeno, and then a barbecue one that's kinda like paprika and smoked sea salt. And those are just kind of fun and challenging in a different way. We don't get to work with a lot of savory flavors or think of savory ideas that often. And so it's just really fun to kinda think outside the box of what we normally get to do.
It sounds fun. I mean, whenever I think of like kind bars, I'm always like you said, the fruits, the
Mhm,
sweet, and like sometimes you don't want something sweet, but you still want that nutrition that you get from the kind bar, but not you just don't want that at like 1 PM. You want the
mhm.
rosemary sounds really good.
Yeah, it's can be good. I think something that I learned that I just hadn't thought to think about was when you're working with things like chocolate, peanut butter, honey, those flavors build over time, or they'll decrease over time. That's just kind of the way food works. And for the sweet flavors, they tend to just slowly decrease over time. And it turns out spices increase like in their flavor and they can change a little bit. And so then, rosemary sea salt bars that are coming straight off the line taste amazing, and for the first 6, 9 months, I still think they taste pretty good, and then after that, they start changing a little bit in a way I'm like so we had to make adjustments for the savory bars. They were definitely like a big we were constantly kind of workshopping them, as they continued to age out in the market, and we were seeing complaints being like, "The rosemary bar is tasting a little soapy." I'm like, "That's definitely not good." So bringing rosemary down a little bit, um, was just so there's always something fun that you're learning when you're doing product development that you can't really predict always because food is such a complex, like, system that you can't always say what's gonna happen.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Like the fact that you bring up a good point with even that the food is changing as it's even on the shelf because you
Mhm,
think about well, you make a cake at home and then it's eaten within let's say a week
mhm.
at really at most. But when you're thinking about bars and you're trying to keep them as natural as you can, as like shelf stable, it's an ongoing battle. But I forget that the flavor also gets affected as well.
Yeah, definitely. We do a lot of shelf life testing, at work, so whether that's, like, leaving bars for 6 months, 9 months, and then tasting them kinda every week after that and seeing, are they acceptable? Like, can we taste rancidity? Things like that. That's one way that we determine, like, how long our bars should be out there besides just general safe, like, food practices is it's really driven by flavor.
When it comes to actually so coming back to when you're developing the product for like the day of, can you kind
Mhm,
of walk me through that process of okay, so you mentioned rosemary. How is it in the lab? Do you just you mentioned earlier you have some help from marketing, but like I'm thinking about people who are wanting to know like what the job actually feels like that day to day, and I guess that's
mhm.
where I'm going with. So like talk about a little bit more about the day to day
Yeah,
responsibilities that you have at your job.
yeah. I'd say my job is it tends to be split pretty evenly, like 50-50 lab time and then sitting at my computer doing emails, meetings, typical kinda office stuff. Um, but for product development at the beginning, that's the best time because you get to kinda try out different things in the lab, and it almost does feel like you're at home just cooking something new where you aren't working off of a recipe. And so I think what I would have done is start with one of our bars, like cranberry almond is a bar that doesn't have like a chocolate coating or peanut butter in it. So it's pretty much just cranberries, honey, and almonds. So I think that's the recipe I would have started with for the rosemary bar. But then I'm kind of just guessing when I'm like, is it 2% rosemary? Is it 10% rosemary? Hard to say until you try it. Um, so it's definitely a lot of kind of test and learn and taste and then get feedback from either the other food scientists on the team that day or the next day, sometime that week, and then go back and redo it. So typically, um, I'd say we make 40 to 60 iterations of a bar before we even go to trial.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. That's a lot.
Yeah, and it'll happen over a few months, but, it's definitely something where you're not gonna get it right the first time around. It's very difficult. So, for me, it's a lot of, just bench work. Our products are actually pretty straightforward. We don't have any crazy fancy equipment for them, so we're able to make it in a KitchenAid stand mixer and a sheet pan for our classic bars. There's, like, maybe one tool that you wouldn't have in your normal kitchen that we use, but other than that, our stuff is pretty straightforward, but other food scientists definitely have access usually to, like, a pilot plant where you'd have smaller versions of the equipment that they use at scale to make their products. It's just not something that we need, so it
Yeah.
can take me probably, like, an hour to make a new formula for a bar, and then I can taste it and go from there.
Has there been anything that has surprised you that's becoming a part of your day-to-day responsibilities that maybe in school that you were like, "I did not plan that I was gonna be doing that, but here I am."
Yeah. Let's see. I think my first job out of college, I worked at, like, a consulting group for research and development, so there wasn't a ton of the logistics or the kinda day-to-day maintenance, kinda behind the scenes. We were mostly helping people come up with new ideas. So when I moved to Kind and I actually had to do work that was, like, uh, you know, adjusting the specification for what an acceptable almond looks like or an acceptable cranberry, um, or kind of just so much paperwork and making sure that things, uh, look right or taste right. It's all, like, very small stuff that happens behind the scenes that, we're kinda doing every day just as we go. And then I feel like the other big thing, probably, like, the shelf life, having to taste as much product as I do. I don't think I could have expected to be in the lab every day tasting something. Like, it's which is honestly great. It's so much fun to see what other people are working on, and give feedback, but you really do spend all day kind of eating.
I only did quality sorry, not quality, I did do product development for, like, a really short period of time during
Mhm.
a co-op position, and I remember eating so much, like, it was like a dairy company, and I was like, I was just like, I didn't realize how much I would be eating 'cause for example, if you had flavor samples coming in,
Yeah.
you're trying, "Okay, well, this needs top notes of this, and this
Mhm.
needs that," and sure, there's the ability to use, like, pH and all that, but then when it comes to taste, like, you have to taste it.
You really do. Yeah. You can't beat, like, people tasting stuff as much as sometimes science is great and you wanna, like, be able to measure things. Like, I used to work, forgetting the name of the machine, but it basically would, like, squish things and be like, "Oh, this is what a bite feels like."
Okay, yeah.
You can do tests like that all day long, but if someone tastes it and they, like, are like, "I don't like the bite of this," that's just it. The consumer at the end of the day doesn't really care about the science, it's more about the feel and, like, the
Absolutely.
taste overall.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you can't beat a human.
Well, I will say, a lot of people probably think that you have their dream job to be able to eat a lot of their
Yeah.
job and just keep tasting and trying, like, it sounds like a dream for a lot of people.
Yes. I don't actually like nuts that much, so it's not my dream, but definitely some people.
It's when you say that again, I did quality control, and one of the tests is, I worked at a nut company, and you had to taste nuts every day,
Mhm.
and it was funny because you say that, I loved protein bars, but because I was eating nuts so much and so often, I didn't want any protein bars that were
Yeah.
nut flavored, and it
Yeah.
was becoming very difficult to find one that wasn't nut.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like you got a really good sense for, like, when nuts went rancid and stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
That's
there's just this you have enough and you work with someone and they're a senior person
Mhm.
and they're like, "This is good, this is bad," and then you just start to know and you're like, "I can't articulate it, but this is the point."
Yeah, yeah. I can now do that. I worked at a flour company when I was interning, and so now I feel like I can smell flour when it gets rancid. I'm like, "Nope, that's gone."
That's a good superpower.
Yeah. Very niche.
And then, okay, well, speaking about skills, what are some of the skills that you use in your job that are some of the most important ones and maybe some that surprised you again?
Um, I think having, like, a good balance of, like, creativity and science technical knowledge, has definitely been super helpful. Food science, like I've been saying, it is technical and there are, like, certain elements that are driven by science for sure. And whether that's, like, looking at water activity of a product to make sure it'll last on a shelf for a certain amount of time without growing mold or having any bacterial issues, or, how much sugar and protein and fat is present in something to make the right nutrition, all kind of science-based. But I think being able to balance that with, like, being a little bit more creative and, um, kind of understanding that there is some things that science can't account for. So definitely, I think I spent a lot of time baking and cooking growing up, and to this day still do it when I'm not too tired from doing lab work all day. And I think that skill has honestly been super helpful. If my boss comes to me and they're like, "We want to try making sugar-free nougat," something super far from what we do today, but they're like, "I want to see if this has legs." I have made nougat before, so in theory, and I have like the kind of general cooking and baking understanding of how kind of like ingredients work to then go and say like, okay, if we're not using sugar, what else can I use to create like a more stable structure for to hold like a foam? And so definitely I think if people are looking for skills that they can gain not in the workforce, but maybe while they're at school, cooking and baking, I can't emphasize enough, are very helpful. Um, and then the other thing I would say is like learning how to communicate with a non-scientific audience. Um, I was super lucky and got to participate in this program at UMass called Icons, which basically had me work with a bunch of different students from different majors. So everyone was in some kind of natural science or math or something like that. But our job was to kind of solve very broad scientific problems. So it was like, why are bee colonies collapsing? Or like, what can UMass, which is the school I went to, do about their food waste issue? And then kind of present it to people to kind of argue why it was a good solution. So that was a way that I was able to learn like how to kind of take super technical information and present it to someone that doesn't have any kind of technical background. And that's something that's come up repeatedly in food science is that the brand team and the sales team and the procurement team tend to not have science backgrounds or they might not have a food science background. And so being able to kind of communicate why something's happening or why it's important that, we use a specific type of honey versus just any other kind of sugar, something like that has been super helpful just overall.
Could we dive a little bit deeper into that and talk about the example? Because you just mentioned honey. Would you be able to explain? You sounded non-technical to me right now. So I guess the example isn't going through. So maybe like take an example about, let's say this honey is too thick for this bar. I don't know,
Mhm.
something like that. Like, how would you present that idea in different ways to different people?
Yeah.
Kind of
So
throwing you on the spot.
that's okay. Um, there's definitely someone out there, I'm sure, like Mars, who's Kind's kind of parent company now. There are people that focus specifically just on sugar. They'd be able to give you an extremely scientific explanation of like there are different types of sugars in honey versus other types of sweeteners, and that's why it has the properties it has, and can create something that stays softer over time versus like straight cane sugar, which would get harder over time. For me, I don't have that super complex background. I understand it generally, and so when I am trying to explain to other people, typically it'd be someone like on the marketing team, they'd say, "Can we swap honey for glucose syrup?" I am someone that believes kind of show and tell typically works best, and so I would make samples and kinda compare and contrast and be like, maybe if they wanted more information, I could talk to them about, like, what kinda sugars break down and those properties and how that works, but for the most part, unless you're working on, like, a super technical project, that hasn't actually been something that I've needed to do. It's usually just kinda demonstrating in real life how something will happen. In, like, a Kind bar, if you do 100% honey, in as the kind of base holding the nuts together, it might kinda it's so soft, it might seep out over time, and you'll just end up with a puddle of honey and like, a pile of nuts. And so that's something I could show pretty easily versus if we did cane sugar, it would be so hard it would break your teeth. So, I think for me, it's always been a show and tell is kind of the best way to do it, but, my backup, if I can't have real samples with me, would be, I tend to use, like, analogies and put the kind of methods that we're using in the lab towards something that people might have done in their kitchen. So, I would kinda see if anyone's ever made toffee or caramel before and go with kind of teaching them or like taffy and kinda use those different ways to explain
That makes sense.
more kinda complex scientific background stuff.
So it really sounds like even if you're not specifically, I like the demonstration, it makes total sense. Like here, here's show and tell. This is not working. But I
Yeah.
like you're still with the analogy. You're still in a way helping to visualize what is happening. Like it seems like you're trying to capture that communication with the visual, that it's not just verbal. Like how can we compare it to something you know? So it's really
Yes.
getting on their level.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the good thing about food is everyone eats it, so everyone has a pretty base
Yeah.
knowledge that, is relatively kinda shared across the platform, even if they don't cook or bake.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because I can imagine for people in like the IT field or
Yeah.
in the technical, like those technical, you talk to me like when you're picking a computer, sometimes I know the
Mhm.
general, but if they're, I don't
No,
know.
it all goes straight over my head, and I don't know how I would even begin to explain it, so
Yeah.
more
I
power to
guess,
'em.
I guess food is really beneficial, but I like how that in school you mentioned that you had past practice working with different types of people like early on. So it wasn't totally new when you came into the workplace.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely I think in general, food scientists aren't necessarily in the center of the organization, but they just kinda tend to, like, interact with every type of person. We work with the packaging and processing engineers pretty closely, but we're also working with the procurement team who's buying our ingredients and the sales team if they have questions about like how do we sell this into Costco? How do we sell that story? Like why is our bar better than that other bar? That's something that they come to us for. And then brand is another team that we work very closely with.
Well, let's go back a little bit because we, as you just said, you'd mentioned about school, and I want to know about how you got to your food job. Like, what first pulled you into food science, and then let's talk about like some key steps to what led you to where you are right now.
Yeah. So I think growing up, I just really loved food and cooking and baking. Like I was just always, I baked every single birthday cake for the family and things like that. And when I was 15, I got a job at a restaurant that I absolutely loved. I worked there for 4 years every summer. I was just front of house. I wasn't even like in the kitchen, but they would let me do small tasks that I really liked. Like I got to cut the bread and peel the garlic and things like that.
Nice,
It was
cool.
really cute. They were good people, but I think I like was turning 18 and starting to apply to colleges and just think about college as a whole. And I definitely thought about culinary school and whether or not that was right for me. And my mom was actually really helpful. And we kind of looked at like the cost of culinary school and the output, and, what life is like as a chef or kind of someone in that space tends to be um, pretty hard work. They are very hardworking people, and so I was lucky that I grew up in Massachusetts, and UMass Amherst has one of the best food science programs. Um, and so I got in-state tuition. And I was like, "All right, that works for me. Like that sounds pretty good." And I visited campus and was able to talk to the food science department and actually the department head, and she was telling me that there was an ice cream competition was like the senior kind of capstone project, and I was like, it's really fun.
That's
You get
fun. Yeah, sounds really
yeah,
fun.
like you have to create a flavor and kinda do the nutritional and the cost and kind of explain to the person who owns the ice cream, uh, business, like, why you should pick our flavor kind of and I was
Oh
like,
my
"That
god,
sounds amazing, like,
that
who wouldn't
sounds
wanna do that?"
amazing.
I couldn't believe that it was a job, so
Yeah.
that led me to food science. I think if I hadn't done it, I probably would have done, like, environmental science or something else in STEM, but, just because UMass had it, that's why I picked it.
Hey, sometimes that's enough of a reason.
Yeah.
Like, because that's something that I feel we talk about the sciences, environmental sciences much more. You think about, oh, that's a career that exists, or that a chef exists, and it's maybe not as evident to a lot of people that all of the stuff that's in the supermarket, something that you interact with almost every day, into like you
Mhm.
go into a convenience store. You just don't realize that food science is like even a
Yeah.
thing.
No, it's definitely I don't know why it's not really taught. Maybe because there isn't, like, that many jobs, like, I think it's still a fairly
Yeah,
small field, like, people tend to know each other, it's that small, but
yeah.
I'd say, like, at least half the time that I meet someone and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm like, "A food scientist." They're like, "I don't even know what that is." So it it's good to educate people, and I think if I had known about it earlier, I definitely would've, you know, picked it earlier.
Was there anything as you went through school, like, obviously you stayed, you must have, like, at first it was, kind of the opportunity, but what was it that kinda kept you staying within it? Because with a food science degree, you could go
Mhm.
into food safety, you could go into, like, bridge off even with that food science degree, like, what made you want to stay within that product development kinda side?
I actually was definitely more on the food safety kinda
Oh,
leaning
okay.
side when I was at school, and I think that was
Interesting.
mostly just, like, the internship I got coming out of freshman year. One of my professors had sent us, like, a link and was like, "This is a good opportunity. It's at North Carolina State University at their food science program. Everyone should apply," and I did, and there was, like, 8 or 10 of us that ended up getting that internship and living down there that summer, and it was about seafood safety and processing plants in North Carolina. Um, yep. Yep, and so got to visit some plants that were very smelly, but pretty clean, and, kind of came back from that summer and reached out to a professor who had, like, related work, and he worked on kinda neurovirus and just regular kind of food safety, issues, and I was like, "Can I work in your lab?" He said, "Sure." And so I kinda just got stuck into that path and did a quality assurance internship my next summer, and then did a food safety kinda teaching, internship the final summer, which was the summer of COVID, that was about, like, PCQI, kind of training. I think it was actually from doing so many different things in undergrad that I learned I probably don't wanna do food safety. As important as it is, I think I really wanted to do something that was more related to cooking and kinda using creativity on a daily basis. So, I was just lucky that I got a job in product development right out of it, right out of college.
Do you mind me asking, was it a bit of a struggle? Because I know a lot of people, it's a challenge finding their first job
Yeah.
out of school. Was it a bit of a challenge for you, if you mind
It
me sharing
it
asking?
was, it was. I think I probably applied over the course of that year to maybe, like, 80 different positions, and
Okay.
I was like, "I'll move anywhere for the right job, like, I'll go wherever you want me to," because I wasn't, stuck on going to Boston or New York or anywhere. I was happy to do anything. Um, and I think I ended up getting 2 jobs offers right at the end of, like right after I had graduated. Both were from someone I knew, so I got an offer from Ocean Spray through a professor, at UMass. He helped me kinda make that connection, and then my friend that had graduated a few years before, she was working at Chew, which is where I ended up taking my first job, but she also kinda got me an in. So, for me, it definitely helped to have, like, a relationship with people within the food science department at UMass and be able to rely on them, because the other jobs where I hadn't known anyone, either I would get interviews, but not the job, or just no response at all.
Hmm. It's interesting that the network that you're speaking about is actually faculty or like people
Mhm.
within, because I feel a lot of you say network and you don't really think of your professors. Like you have a good relationship, you go to class, you it might feel a little bit closer when you're in the upper years because the things tend to get smaller. But
Yeah.
the fact that you can have help from your faculty, I think that's really important to show like actually show up to class and pay attention, not just graduate, but also
Yes.
like present yourself.
Yeah. No, I definitely think it is important. I definitely wasn't, like, the best student in high school, and I think when I went to college, I was like, "Okay, this is my, like, opportunity to turn things around and, like, be really dedicated to school," and so I was definitely that annoying kid that was, like, always raising my hand and talking to teachers when I got the chance, but the professors were really just great at UMass. It's a very small program. I wanna say
Okay.
there's usually at most 100 undergrads at a time, and I think my class was closer to, like, maybe 10 to 15 kids by the time we
Oof,
graduated. So it
that's
was like
small.
we all knew each other, and it was easy to get to know the professors, and in general, UMass was just like everyone was very willing to help. Um, so it was definitely good to have that network. It's come in
And
handy more than once.
have you when you were in school, besides classes, did you do any extracurriculars? Like, were
Mhm.
you part of any clubs?
Yeah, I participated in the food science club. Definitely a good amount my first and second year, and then helped run it, I wanna say my senior year. I did Food Science College Bowl, which is
Okay,
food
what is
science
that?
trivia, um,
Okay.
and it's you kinda just get together maybe weekly, biweekly, and do trivia questions that are specifically, like, food related or, like, microbiome related, chemistry, and then I think it's, like, once a year, you go meet regionally with schools, so
Oh my god, this is
for
serious.
oh, it's serious, we traveled. By serious, I mean not really, but it
It
was
was
very
serious enough to
fun.
travel.
Yeah, serious enough to travel. So our, like, little region was, like, McGill, Cornell, Rutgers, UMaine, and then UMass, I wanna say were the 5 of us, we get together, and then the winner from that gets to go to IFT, which is the Institute of Food Technologists kind of conference
Yeah.
every year. So the winners from like the 5 or 7 different regions throughout the country get to go for free and compete there. Um, so I never got that far, but I always had a great time, and definitely the people that I knew through College Bowl, I'm at least still close with one of them, and she helped me get my job after college, and then still, like, friendly with other people, so, it helped form a good community, and I met, like, not only undergrads, but also graduate students, which was really helpful.
Okay, that just sounds really fun. Like,
It was fun.
irregardless of, like, finding out jobs and all that, like, that just
Yeah.
sounds like a good time.
No, it was fun. I liked it.
And do you currently or while you're in school, did you do any networking outside of school?
I honestly don't think I used, like, IFT or any of those organizations too much. I think the people I tended to know from other schools or just in industry were through internships or just honestly just life. But yeah, I don't think I did use IFT or IAFP too much. I did go to both conferences at least once um, through either an internship or work. But yeah, they do have good like organizations that try and connect students. But I
Okay.
don't think I was really involved.
I think that's I just wanted to point out as well because I think that's good to know that I have spoken to other people in the on the podcast where they were heavily involved at IFT and like that's how they got their networking. But I think it's good to show that there's different ways of finding jobs and it like one path might work for one person. And of course it's great to network. Like if you have the opportunity, go to
Yeah.
those. But I know IFT can be like really expensive or like geography or those types of things, but it's not like the be all end all.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I don't think I would have ever gone if I had to pay for myself. It was always, like, through an internship or something that I got to go. But, yeah, for me, like, I loved participating in those product development competitions that IFT, like, supports, and that would just be at UMass, so it would be, put together kind of in a random group of kids that I wouldn't necessarily know otherwise, but we all wanted to do a product development competition, and our professors would be like, "Oh, talk to this person, they're a senior, there's a junior over there, and then there's you as a freshman, you can do something." Um, so even just, like, doing the programs that they have kinda set up that you can do at school works totally fine too.
Yeah, makes sense. And you
Yeah.
again, you get to meet different types of people because, you might be a food scientist. Once you get specialized as you go in a little bit more, it might be, oh, this is kind of my knowledge or this is my knowledge. Like what inspiration have you had and like having those conversations?
Yeah, definitely.
So let's go back to your job currently and just talking about common challenges. Like I can imagine you have a lot working in product development. So why don't we just talk about it? Like, what are some of the common struggles that you might have, and maybe there's a lesson we can pull from that.
Yeah. I'd say at Kind specifically, the biggest challenges have come from like the kind of rules that we develop our products around. So Kind always has a nutrient dense first ingredient, so it's nuts or oats typically. Um, and then they're also kosher, non-GMO, gluten-free. They tend to not have too much sugar. There's no like high fructose corn syrup or artificial flavors. So all of those can kind of restrict what you're allowed to do and what ingredients you can use and how creative you can get. And so between those things, and then there's always brand is always coming to you saying, "Oh, we want 8 grams of protein or 20 grams of protein or only 3 grams of sugar," or things like that. Um, those tend to be the biggest challenges where we have to work around guardrails that we're given, and it tends to kinda narrow what you can do to, like, a very small range, and you have to get creative and figure out, like, how you can broaden that kind of, like, pipeline of opportunities and be a little creative that way. So it's, coming up and doing your research on new ingredients that are coming out that might be interesting to try or, processing methods and working with the processing team to think about, like, what's the best way to make something. Um, but that tends to be the biggest challenge, and then timeline would be my other one. Um, you can't get product out on the shelf fast enough. If the brand and sales team could do it, they would want it out in 2 to 3 months, just enough time for them to sell it in and for it to show up. But obviously, it takes time to develop, and then it also you wanna be able to test the shelf life of a product if it's
Mhm.
something new, for at least 6 months, if not a full shelf life kinda cycle. So that tends to be the biggest thing. And then I would say the one other thing that I didn't kinda foresee was, when projects get canceled, I'd say the biggest challenge is, like, you kinda get emotionally attached to these products, like, you
Okay.
work for so long and you're like, "Oh, it's my little baby, I'm so proud of it, like, it's come so far and I've made it better," and you do get, like, emotionally, like, involved and you're like, "I
Right.
can't wait to see what people think and read the reviews and see how well it sells," and then for some reason or not, it's you never know what it is, it could be totally random, but things will just be like, "Alright, that project's canceled. We might come back
Ouch.
to it, save all your work, but it's canceled." For me, it's like 50% of the time it does come back, but 50% of the time it's just dead in the water, and that's been
Yeah.
kinda it's hard sometimes.
Oh, I can imagine, and I guess I'm just thinking of I guess with, like, marketing and that, I have to think of Dubai chocolate because I feel like that is, like, the thing, and maybe it's not
It is.
related to, like, what you do, but I bet, like, the marketing teams are like, "Can we have that out next month so we can, like, catch on that train?" And
Yes.
because, like, trends come out of nowhere.
Mhm.
So
They really do. That's something I feel like I've kind of been fighting is, like, whether or not do you chase trends
mm,
knowing that your product won't make it out for a full year? Like, right now, seed oils kinda have this, like, I don't know, like, really kinda big group that are saying they're really horrible for you. They cause inflammation, they're not healthy, take them out of your diet. Science isn't supporting that, but it is a trend and people are buying around it. Do we take out canola oil, which is, it's an unsaturated fat, it's not bad for you, and it's easy for us to, like, supply and swap it in with something that's more expensive, or as a saturated fat, it might be worse for your health, but then it's not technically seed oil. Um, so for me, it's just been an interesting kind of conversation to have with our own team, like, on product development and the brand team. It's like, do we chase the trend of protein and really continue to put out high protein bars and hope that protein continues to be, like, the kinda, like, macronutrient that people focus on? Or, fibers coming up and being a really big thing with Olipop and Poppy. People are
yeah.
definitely starting to focus on it. Do we
Yeah.
chase that? Our bars are high in fiber, let's make one that has 10 grams of fiber from flax seeds or hemp hearts or something that's good for you. And, science has proven that people need more fiber, like Americans don't get enough. Do we chase that before it's even a thing and take that bet? So it can be a challenge, and different companies definitely have different philosophies on kind of which path they choose.
Yeah, coming from and that ties in nicely to what you were saying earlier about getting emotionally attached because you're kind of fighting with, like, of course, you're working as a team and you're going to use data, but sometimes I know some products you go by a gut feeling as much as you do use as much data to support it. It's like,
Mhm.
do we trust that gut instinct or what is our portfolio? What does our brand represent? Like, I can imagine that the choices being a product developer can sometimes also be a little, I don't want to say overwhelming, but there's a lot of places you can go. Like
Mhm.
the sky's the limit, really.
It really is. Yeah, I saw an interesting article, I want to say a few months back, about nerd gummy clusters, which,
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
really taken off. And I think they're a pretty new product in the past few years. And that, like, they had done consumer data and, like, interviewed their consumers, and they weren't interested. Like, consumers were like, "This is kind of not interesting to me based on the idea." But the food scientists, I believe, were the ones that pushed it and were like, "This is a really good product. Get it out there and maybe it'll sell once it's out." And you have to just trust that people who aren't currently buying Nerds or Nerds ropes are gonna want it, and it worked really well. It's clearly, like, a massive success, like, everyone's talking about it for the first
Yeah, for
time, I
sure.
feel like, in years. Like, I don't know anyone my age that was eating Nerds, but
No.
now I'm buying them, like, once a month at least because 'cause
Yeah.
they're so good. So I think sometimes it's, like, back to that, like, you can wanna rely on science but in consumer data and, you know, marketing trends, but sometimes you can't predict what people want, and, consumers, like, there's only so much science you can rely on. It's just really food is just so driven by emotion and, like, love for certain things or hate, and you can't really predict.
That's a good point. And sometimes you don't even know what you don't know. Like, you
Mhm.
don't know that you would love this product and this, and it suits your lifestyle until you incorporate it. And then you're like, oh, this is really great. I would have
Yeah.
never thought that I like this.
Yeah, exactly.
And then as well, kind of going on this instinct, and you've mentioned a couple of times through the conversation, like this idea of creativity. Do you do anything to kind of stretch your creativity or practice being creative? Because I know there's a lot of people who could be like, I'm a scientist, I'm not creative. Like, I do the data, but I know that there's ways to train it. Like artists, they have, they might paint in different art styles or they might try different mediums and
Mhm.
different things. So, is there anything that you do particularly to like stretch your creativity or something that's related to food that maybe someone could practice?
Yeah. Um, I think I like to be pretty involved in just like food media, whether that's on TikTok or Instagram or like actually going to restaurants and interacting with like kind of seeing what they're doing. It's definitely something I like make a mental note to pay attention to. But my absolute favorite thing to do is just go to the grocery store. I think this probably I should have known ahead of time that I would be a food scientist because of how much I love the grocery store. I, as a kid, actually wanted to be a checkout person
Oh
at the
my
grocery
god.
store.
That's cute.
But I just really love, especially like one that I don't normally go to, especially if I'm visiting another country. I love walking around and just seeing what they're doing, even if it's like packaging that's interesting or just like different ingredients that they have access to on a regular basis that, would be really hard to find in the States or just brands and seeing what they're putting out and like, things when they have a little new label, I pay attention to that. I'm like, oh, Nature's Bakery, Nature Valley, like all these different brands are putting out something new. Like, let's pay attention and see what they're doing. Um, and I think that's something that's definitely accessible to everyone. And, it doesn't even have to be baking or cooking. It can just be like seeing what's out there. Um, and then I think the other thing that I feel like all of us on my team do is we're regularly just like spitballing ideas and constantly being like, okay, so what if we did this bar, but like added this on top and then, crushed up this and put it on top. Like, and then we'll give each other very honest feedback and be like, that's a terrible idea. It's going to taste like crap. Or like, be like, no, no, you should make that right now. You should stop all your real work and go do that instead. But I think I feel like it's really hard. Like, it could just, I think it's helpful to just think about food every time like you interact with it and be like, what can make this better? What don't I like about this? Like, I don't know, and in that way, it just kinda comes more naturally over time.
Honestly, it just sounds like you're just trying to have fun. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know, it just sounds like having
Yeah,
fun makes you more creative.
it definitely does.
Yeah. And then where do you see the future of food product development going? Because with product development, like we just said that there's a lot of fun, but I can imagine like thinking about the future as well, there's a lot of maybe fun opportunities. Do you see food product development changing in the near future? Is there alternatively, maybe another question would be like, is there anything exciting you right now about like the future of your industry?
Yeah. Um, in general, I feel like I kinda see food science and food product development going in 2 different paths that kinda
Okay.
almost conflict with each other, but, um, I this might be just coming from, like, the kind perspective of what we're paying attention to, but I'm seeing a lot of brands focus on, like, clean labels, very few ingredients, focusing on that aspect of things where it's more about what it not what it looks like and what it tastes like, but what's in it and how healthy it is for you and, like, driving, um, kind of like not convenience, but, like, health as the number 1 driver for why you'd buy a packaged product. And then the other kinda stream that we're seeing is, like, things like Bear Bells or MET-Rx bars that are kinda focused on what they give you. So it's for that, it's like 20 grams of protein, 0 sugar, X amount of fiber, and that's all in a convenient wrapper that you can not have to think about, you just eat it. But if you look at their ingredient labels, they're complicated and the average person probably doesn't know why certain ingredients are in there and they're long. And that's not inherently bad, it's just, different from the other kind of, like,
Yeah,
more clean
absolutely.
label things we're seeing. Um, and I honestly I think that kinda, like, diversion division, I don't know what it would be, but might keep going and you might continue to see, like, 2 different types of products. One that's driven based on, like, what the product is giving you and maybe more on, like, interesting ingredients that are kinda coming up, and then one that's based on the health and, um, kind of overall appeal of having a more natural look and feel and ingredient to it.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah.
I guess that would make sense. I mean, one thing that's nice about the food industry is that there is opportunity for both to exist, like maybe in the car manufacturing. Like, of course, there's different SKUs, and I talk like I know about cars. But like, I feel like with food, there's more of an opportunity to have diversity in the different choices you can have. Like, you're not going to go, maybe if it's like a small grocery store, they might only have like two options. But then when you look at like the grand scale of the whole grocery store, like across the States or Canada, that there are the indulgent snack bars, there's the very clean label, like healthier types, or there's the like there's just so much of an opportunity. And I think that finding there's a lot of opportunities for product developers to find something that aligns with what they like particularly, because there's just different types of people and there's different diets and there's just, there's different health conditions. Like one person, they have to be very super mindful if you have diabetes for sugar, but then there's another person where they just want the indulgent snack at the end of the day, and that's okay too. So there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, everyone definitely has very different eating habits. Definitely encourage you to, like, ask people to, like, outline kinda, like, what they eat in a day. I know we see a lot of influencers doing that, but I had one project for my last job where we actually had to ask a few different people, like, how they actually eat throughout the day, like, what are they eating? And it was really interesting, like, people are very different even within a family, like, I interviewed my aunt, and she had very different eating habits than I would ever have, and it was so interesting to hear about that versus, my grandmother or a friend, they all had just different things that they look for when they're at the grocery store. Like, one relies on the exact same thing every single week and doesn't want to change and relies on that product being the same every week, and they'd be very disappointed if their bread or their cheese was either out of stock or old or they change something, whereas I'm always looking for something new. I wanna try something different that I haven't tried before, and I only go back to certain things when I really love it. And I'm like, "Okay, I really like that one specific flavor of Ben& and Jerry's. I'm gonna go back repeatedly
Yeah.
and only get that." But everything else in my grocery shopping list is changing.
Cool. I guess that's another fun thing. You can go to the grocery store, you can start asking people what they eat within like your
Mhm.
friend group, and it's just that curiosity. It sounds like you're bringing out a lot of
Yes.
curiosity.
Yeah.
So, we're coming near the end of the conversation, and there's two more questions that I do want to ask you. And of course, I want to know about working at Kind. Like, what has been some of your most rewarding experiences? What do you love about your job?
There's a lot to love about working at Kind. Sounds corny, but,
Hey, you love it.
um, I do enjoy it, and I think Kind is the first place I've ever had a product hit the shelf, so that was really exciting for me to, like, be
Congrats.
able to see or I don't even think I saw it on the shelf, but I think someone in my family was like, "Isn't this the bar that you're working on right now?" And they sent me a picture from Whole Foods, and I
That's
was
so
like, "Oh my god, it's
sweet.
out? That's crazy." So that was really exciting. In general, though, Kind is a very, uh, kind organization. They give us, I think it's what is it? A full day each quarter to volunteer to whatever
Wow.
organization we want to. Sometimes they do like they organize the trips themselves and we just get to pick and go. Um, they donate a lot of ours to places that need it, or people. During COVID, they definitely donated a lot towards, healthcare and in wildfires. They'll send bars to the firefighters and the communities that need food in that moment. And so working for a company that has good morals and also stands on like creating healthy food, I think is really important to me. So that's been really great to see, that, they have stood strong to creating products that they have the nutrient dense first ingredient, which if you actually look, it's sometimes the first ingredient in a lot of our products is sugar or fat or something that you might not want. Like if you took a handful of sugar and a handful of every other ingredient in the product, would it upset you to see like there's more sugar than anything else? It might make me upset and I might not buy that product, but kind is really good about being like nuts are number one first or oats are number one. So I think um, being able to work for a company that has strong morals and continues to kind of like do the best they can to give back towards the communities that we sell to is really it's really great.
I love that. That's wonderful. And then for the last question I want to ask, I guess it's a two-parter, is for those students that are maybe dreaming of going into your job, what do you think is the first thing that they should be doing right now while they're in school? And then what is one thing that they should stop worrying about for the future?
Mm, I think the thing we talked about where you're like going to grocery stores or just cooking and baking at home, it's only going to benefit you. Like you're going to learn so much just paying attention to what's out there in the market. That's always something that's come up in interviews for me as a food scientist, so you might not get as, like, in another job, but people have always asked, like, "Oh, what trends are you seeing right now?" Like, or Kind even asked, like, "If you had to pitch a product for Kind to launch, what would it be?" And I had to come up with something on the spot, so
Oh my.
having, like
Yeah,
yeah, that was a
wow.
lot. Um, having, like, an idea of what is exciting to people right now in the food world is definitely helpful, and something that's relatively cheap or free to do, and it just takes your time. And then the other thing I think would be kinda utilizing the network that is available at school. Food science programs in general tend to be small, and the more you can do to, like, put yourself out there and just meet people, um, it will really help. I think, connecting with professors versus students, all of it, it's all good. Um, Something I think you don't need to focus on, let's see. I think, um, maybe, like, the super specific things in class, unless you know you're someone who wants to go get your PhD and really focus on, like, food chemistry, food micro, things like that, I wouldn't stress yourself out. Obviously, pay attention in school,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
do the work, do well on your tests, whatever you want, but I think there's so many learning opportunities once you get out into the industry that and it's also gonna be specific. I never learned about, like, anything specific to almonds in school. I might have learned about, like, the fat system
Yeah.
in general and, like, how that kinda works in your body or, like, how fats go rancid or, saturated versus unsaturated and things like that, but, and that was helpful to have, but I couldn't have possibly learned about nuts and, like, things to that specific, or if you're working in, like, the meat industry or the dairy industry or baking, like, there's gonna be opportunities for the most part to learn in industry. I think focus on kind of the broader parts of food systems and just learning in general in school, and know that if it doesn't all stick in your brain right away, that's okay because 'cause you'll have
It's a good
time to
reminder,
learn
it's a good
more.
reminder.
Yeah, you definitely will have time to learn more, as you go throughout your career.
Awesome. I think, yeah, students need to hear that from the source right here that you don't have to have everything figured out. And like you said, unless you're going to super specifics and maybe you
Yeah.
want to keep the door open for graduate school, maybe it's not. Of course, general knowledge, very important, but
Yes.
it's a combination of people skills, technical skills, as you've spoken about.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always opportunities to learn more, so don't get too stressed out would be my number 1 rule.
Thank you so much, Louisa, for taking time to talk with me. Like, I think this was a great conversation to learn more about product development, to learn about like what you do in the day. And I think that any student who would love to go into this area is going to learn a lot. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.